Hello, horror fans. What's new? Let me ask you a question real quick. What would you do if you saw a floating red balloon in front of you? Run? Okay, that's a valid answer. How about a teenage boy with slicked back hair, a spectacularly mean face, and a switchblade? Oh, you'd take him on, would you? Well, that would be your very last mistake. Don't believe us? Let us tell you why the homegrown horror of Derry, Maine, a wee bundle of trauma and rage known as Henry Bowers, is the stuff of our nightmares. Of course, he gets manipulated by the creepy clown known as Pennywise, but the evil inside him, that's all his own. No help needed. Buckle up because we're going to dive deep into the backstory, fate, and sheer human horror of Henry Bowers across the novel, the miniseries, and the big screen. Before we get into our explanation though, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. It's a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin.
My knife.
Meet Henry Bowers, Derry's homegrown nightmare. Those of you who haven't watched the movies in some time must be asking right now, who in the world is Henry Bowers? A classic run-of-the-mill bully, you might think. But examine him a bit more closely and you'll find a walking pressure cooker of rage, trauma, and violence. Born of Butch and Hilda Bowers, Henry had a rough beginning to his life, and from then on things just grew so much worse. Butch Bowers, Henry's very own father, was a Class A racist and a violently inclined drunkard with an equally hair-trigger temper. Butch would have been the mascot best fitting the term toxic masculinity. Henry grew up in an atmosphere of fear and brutality. Butch did not only discipline his son, he dominated him, humiliated him, broke him down until all Henry could do was lash out. His life was cursed by emotional neglect and by ever-present terror, scars that ran far deeper than anything visible to the world beyond the walls of the Bowers house. Poor Henry, he absorbed all that hatred and poured it into cruelty for literally everyone around him, because that was all he knew. From the very start, Henry reigned supreme at the head of all the terrors in the schoolyard. He heads the so-called Bowers gang, made up of the hopelessly delinquent Vic Chris, Belch Huggins, and Patrick Hockstetter. For lack of a better term, they're just a really bad version of the Breakfast Club. These guys dedicate some serious time to sickeningly tormenting the Losers Club, with poor Ben, Mike, and Beverly bearing the brunt. Under the leadership of Henry, these kids would not just harass or tease, but would pour all the might they had into merciless brutality under some lame pretense of cruel fun. And if you consider his methods, you'll see that Henry is kind of psychotic. Carves initials in bellies and sets hair on fire kind of psychotic. Throwing slurs around like nothing, chasing kids with literal knives, this kid is more than just a bully, he is in serious starter pack territory for a serial killer. Henry doesn't want attention, he doesn't want revenge, he wants control, domination, and the grand performance of seeing someone else suffer. As for limits, there are none. As he portrays so aptly, there are no lines he wouldn't dare cross. His little henchmen, the Bowers gang, might help him carve an alphabet or two, but Henry truly seems to have no qualms about getting his hands dirty. Indeed, it sometimes seems he almost relishes doing so. You can almost feel the evil radiating from him. And what's worse, he's still just a kid with trauma packing the punch of an adult.
One down.
Henry Bowers in the It novel, unleashed rage and a fall into madness. In the vast narrative of Stephen King's It, Henry Bowers is not just the school-ground bully, he's actually one of the most gruesome and horrific manifestations of human evil in the entire fiction. Even before Pennywise really starts whispering in his ear, Henry is already well on his way to becoming a monster. His character is a chilling exploration of how hatred, abuse, and unchecked rage can fester into something truly horrifying. On the surface, Henry may seem like your average street punk. He picks on the small and weak, he relishes in vulnerability, and he rolls with a gang that backs him up in his cruelty. But King gives disturbing detail to Henry's character. This brand of cruelty is by no means random. No, it's premeditated and sadistic. More to the point, he picks on Mike Hanlon, uttering racial slurs, threats, and anti-black racism. A distinguishing mark from your average fictional bully. Henry isn't just mean, he's downright wicked. King lets us know early on that Henry came from an abusive family. His father, Butch Bowers, is a violently racist man who beats his son regularly and instills his bigotry. To Henry, Butch is in every sense the first monster. The abuse at home becomes a breeding ground for his behavior, but King isn't using anything as an excuse for Henry's conduct. Instead, he shows how Henry takes the very principles he was taught and uses them to gain power in the most disgusting way possible over his victims. To illustrate, Henry and his gang ambush Ben Hanscom. Henry not only physically beats down on him, he holds down Ben while carving an H into his stomach with a switchblade. This moment isn't some random act of rage or impulse, it's a calculated act of domination. It simply shows how far Henry gets off on feeding fear and suffering. When Pennywise comes into play, things go from bad to worse. Pennywise is not there to turn Henry evil, he sees Henry's wickedness and simply cranks it up several notches. The clown offers whispers of ideas and suggestions into Henry's already poisoned mind. Hallucinations, visions, and a break from reality start to plague Henry. His slow-growing madness becomes all the more terrifying, because what's more terrifying than a psychopath losing control? The most important moment in the novel comes when Henry and his gang chase the losers into the sewers. Here, Pennywise picks them off one by one. Victor Criss and Belch Huggins both die in grotesque supernatural manners. Rather than being horrified and snapping out of the Pennywise haze, Henry goes berserk. Watching his friends die in front of him doesn't deter him, it breaks his mind and pushes him towards actual insanity. Soon after, Henry returns home to murder his father as his father sits in front of the television. This is one of the truly creepy scenes in the book. Henry is pushed on by Pennywise, who's laughing on the TV behind his father as Henry drives a knife into Butch's neck. In killing the man who made him a monster, he's rejecting the control his father had over him and coming into his own as the monster he's become. From there on, once he's committed himself, he enters the sewers again, this time with the clear intent of killing the losers. He comes at them like a madman, trying to slash them to be rid of them one by one, but against the collective will of the Losers Club, he simply didn't stand a chance. He was properly beaten, then recklessly beaten, and in the end, just left. Pennywise didn't even have to do anything to him, he just had to let Henry take the fall for him, that's all. Outside the sewers, he was found to be raving like a madman covered in blood. He made a perfect scapegoat for the strange deaths across Derry. No one questioned his being blamed for the murder of his friends and even other kids. He was arrested, charged, tried, and sentenced to Juniper Hill Asylum, thus becoming the most lonely, broken, and desolate soul. In the second part of the novel, Henry is introduced back into the tale with the appropriate amount of violence, which is too much. The decades had sped by, with Pennywise ever keeping a memory of his human puppet. As the losers came back to Derry as adults, Henry too was sent for by Pennywise. He's broken out of the Juniper Hill Asylum and after the Loser Club with the sole instruction of kill them all. And, like a good soldier, that's exactly what he tries to do. He enters the home of Mike Hanlon, stabs him, and creates chaos and bloodshed with Mike just barely managing to stay alive. Soon after this, Henry goes after Eddie Kasprak, with Eddie stabbing him right in the cheek and eventually killing him in self-defense and laying to rest once and for all this human monster. What terrifies the readers about Henry Bowers in the novel is that his horror comes from the basic human evil. He's just a neighborhood child, a teenager, created by our worlds. There isn't any shape-shifting clown or people-eating ancient evil from outer space. His evil is surrounded by real anguish, real hatred, and real abuse. This makes his arc all the more disturbing. There's no redemption for Henry. There's never a moment where he sees his error and asks for forgiveness. He is fully dropped down the abyss, but not only is he a villain, he's also a warning. King is claiming Henry as an example of how, for real-world monsters to take shape, a society simply needs to turn a blind eye to abuse, support hatred instead of curbing it, and allow the vulnerable to wield power through fear. Henry Bowers does not only embody madness, he also shows us how it grows, step by step, from seeds planted in childhood, watered by trauma, and bloomed under the influence of something ancient and malevolent. In a story filled with demons and phantoms, he remains one of the scariest characters, mainly because he could exist in any town, anywhere. The miniseries Madness, Henry Bowers, TV edition. The 1990 It miniseries took the raw intensity of Henry Bowers and gave it a small screen translation that kept all the dread while dialing back some of the gore. I mean, it was the 90s after all, and this was network TV. Even having cut gore out of the miniseries, it remained true to the essence of the character of Henry, that of a hateful, broken, and dangerously unpredictable kid that grows into a maniac. In this version, young Henry, played by Jared Blancard, is every bit the sadistic teen bully from the book, but there is a slick, almost cinema-like focus to his torture. He still runs with Vic and Belch, and the trio's tormenting of the losers is pretty much the same, if a little sanitized. From chasing Ben to attacking Mike with rocks and racial epithets, it's all there. Emotional volatility, the need for domination, unfiltered rage, just oozing from every frame that he's in. It's the death of his friends and the killing of his abusive father, Butch, that triggers Henry's breaking in the miniseries, just as it does in the novel. But what the TV version adds is an element of surreal horror. One gets a sense of how completely he's lost his grip on reality when Pennywise is manipulating Henry. The whole experience of him losing his mind is terrifyingly abrupt. Watching a child's sanity shatter before your eyes can't be an easy experience. As an adult, Henry, played by Michael Cole, now reappears as a crazed escapee from Juniper Hill Asylum. The miniseries accentuates that he's completely off his rocker. He's clearly been rendered insane through his own past and through the lingering influence of Pennywise. He still has his show-up moment by stabbing Mike and trying to take out the rest of the losers, but likewise fails, just like in the novel. The miniseries gives no quarter in its portrayal of Henry. Never does it attempt to make him sympathetic. Instead, it underscores just how utterly tragic Henry's fate truly is. There's this sense of a kid who never really stood a chance, abused, manipulated, and ultimately cast aside by the very evil that depleted him. His fate is a dark mirror of the loser's own story, the place you go if you fall instead of fight. Henry on the big screen, the modern monster in the movies. Now, let's talk about how this Stephen King mammoth was adapted in the recent 2017 and 2019 films under the direction of the clever Andy Muschietti. The films were simply merciless in their depiction of Henry Bowers. Nicholas Hamilton's performance in the role of Henry was chillingly crazy, making him a person much more horrible and deranged than ever in the story. Seriously, if you think novel Henry is wicked, movie Henry screams nightmare fuel. From the beginning, everything throws in your face the fact that Henry is not someone you want to cross paths with. Rather than a simple bully, he's a walking powder keg that's just waiting to be ignited. He relishes in the almost ritualistic tormenting of the Losers Club without ever second-guessing his depraved acts or even showing a hint of guilt. No, what he feels at seeing others hurt by his hand is pure sadistic happiness. The Bowers gang, as displayed in the films, comes off as even more vicious and volatile. Patrick Hockstetter in the movies has his own sinister subplot, which beautifully ends with him being killed by Pennywise in a most horrific fashion. Every member of the Bowers gang acts as an amplifier to the cruelty that is wrought by Henry, and when they're killed by Pennywise, Henry just recedes further into darkness. The most shocking scene of the 2017 rendering for the viewers didn't have anything to do with the killer clown. It was the scene where Henry Bowers slashes the throat of his father with a switchblade in cold blood in front of the TV. The scene involving Pennywise encouraging Henry in a cheerful voice from the TV to kill his father is pure psychological horror. Henry stoically impales his father's neck, and as the blood pours down the body of Butch Bowers and sprays Henry's own face with vibrant red drops, we see his sanity shatter into pieces. We know there's no going back for him, not anymore. In It, Chapter 2 from 2019, the adult Henry becomes a psychotic wreck at Juniper Hill, from where he escapes with the help of the zombie version of Belch, still sucky and undead, and heads straight to Derry with thoughts of murder on his mind. He stabs Mike, bashes Eddie, and gets a knife in the chest for his troubles. Brutal. The films don't only portray Henry as terrifying, but also tragic. A wreckage of boyhood, a waste of a lifetime, and a boy who had no chance at ever finding a path to redemption. But don't get it twisted, he still remains a monster, just a very human monster. The making of a human monster, Henry Bowers' personality, appearance, and legacy. Next, we're going to delve into why Henry Bowers is truly the most terrifying character in Stephen King's It. It's not just his switchblade, his entourage of delinquent lackeys, or even the cosmic clown whispering murder in his ear. No, what really makes Henry terrifying is his realness. He isn't supernatural, he doesn't come from an alternate dimension, he's just hate within abuse and the festering rot of small-town evil, all too human and all too plausible. Henry is described as having a moon-shaped face, pale skin, and slicked-back hair, a look that screams menace in the making. Across adaptations, whether it's in the miniseries or the films, he's portrayed with a twisted sneer, eyes welling with rage, and a swaggering, violent presence. That stare alone, it's enough to chill even the most sturdy bones. But what solidifies Henry's identity as a kind of human monster is his personality. He's a walking powder keg of aggression and impulsive sadism. He's not just cruel, he takes delight in cruelty, and it's not limited to physical violence. Henry knows how to psychologically torment his victims, going after their race, class, gender, anything he can weaponize. And here's the scary part, Henry chooses violence. Sure, he's the byproduct of his father, Butch Bowers, a racist, abusive tyrant who sows the seed of hate in his child. Of course, Henry internalizes that toxicity and takes it a step further. But at some point, he stops being a victim and becomes a willing vessel for destruction. This is why Pennywise doesn't need to do much at all. He doesn't possess Henry, he unleashes him. Henry's desire is disturbingly simple. He wants power, control, and most of all, to be feared. He doesn't have a complex ideology or misunderstood motive. No, in fact, he's a person driven by dominance. Where Pennywise feeds on fear, however, Henry creates it. No magic, no supernatural help, just pure human malice. Henry Bowers is, in many ways, the true monster of Derry. Pennywise encompasses cosmic horror, and yet Henry? That's a horror that unnerves people by making them feel human. He's what happens when a community turns a blind eye to abuse, when hate festers unchecked, and when a kid decides that hurting others is the only way to feel alive. And that's not just frightening, it's unforgettable. Marvelous verdict! In our opinion, Henry Bowers is Stephen King's ode to the ultimate schoolyard bully. He reminds viewers of the times when they were little children cowering behind the bush while the hunt was on. And that's terrifying. King banks on the power of memories to make this sadistic little rascal the stuff of nightmares. So is Henry Bowers the real monster of Derry? We think yeah. Pennywise might be the flashy villain with the supernatural edge, but Henry represents something way darker, the human capacity for cruelty. And that's bone-chilling horror that no clown can achieve. Between the pages of the book, the frames of the miniseries, or the big screen, one thing is clear. Henry Bowers isn't just a bully, he's a real monster. And he doesn't even need a red balloon to do it. That's all we got for you this time, but if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Otherwise, thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and have a marvelous day.